Welcome to this explainer. You know that crazy gut instinct you get sometimes, the one that completely defies logic? Well, today we are diving into a genuinely fascinating philosophical framework by author Feng that argues our intuition, not our logic, is actually the most reliable tool we possess. We're going to explore why that totally inexplicable feeling in the pit of your stomach might just be the most accurate compass you have.
Okay, so think about this for a second. Can your highly trained, logical brain actually hold you back from understanding the future? We live in a world that is just obsessed with data, right? Rational thinking, measurable outcomes. We're always told to weigh the pros and cons. But what if the source material is right and relying on that logic actively blinds us to a deeper truth? It sounds totally counterintuitive, but this framework challenges the absolute core of how we make decisions today.
To get this, we have to look at how Feng fundamentally redefines human perception. According to the text, we don't just have the standard 5 senses. Nope, we have a crucial, built-in 6th sense called our spiritual sense, and it has one highly specific job: to perceive and recognize the non-material world. It's an entirely separate mechanism built for the intangible realities that our physical eyes and ears literally cannot process. The framework basically splits our reality right down the middle into two strict domains. We use our physical senses for the tangible, material world, stuff we can touch and measure, but for the non-material world, we absolutely must rely on our spiritual sense. Trying to use logic to understand the unseen world is kind of like trying to taste a math equation. It's just the completely wrong tool for the job.
And what's truly staggering is the sheer scope of this unseen world. We aren't just talking about a spooky feeling here. The text explicitly categorizes massive concepts like the past, the future, realms like heaven and hell, the unseen physiological fields of other people, and even your future good or bad luck. All of that is ruled entirely by the spiritual sense. So if you want to know what's coming next in your life, the author says your rational mind is essentially flying blind.
So what does this mean for the limits of logic and history? Well, it's a pretty sharp critique of how we currently operate.
Feng puts it incredibly bluntly. Past experiences can never solve the difficulties and predicaments faced in the present and future. Think about the weight of that statement. Logical inferences are inherently flawed because they're built entirely out of pre-existing knowledge. But the future is completely fluid. You can't solve a brand new problem using only the data of the past. Logic builds a rigid box, while the spiritual sense operates completely free of that history.
Actually, the text goes a step further, taking a massive swing at historical accuracy itself. It brings up a famous example from Chinese history, suggesting that foundational events, like the widely admired abdications of ancient figures like Yao, Shun, and Yu, might actually be fabricated, even in hugely respected texts like Sima Qian's historical records. The takeaway here is wild. If the historical data we use to form our logic is distorted or just flat-out fake, then any logical conclusion we draw from it is practically guaranteed to be wrong from the start.
All right, so testing books and people, how do we actually apply this out in the real world? Get this. Instead of looking up reviews, which the author says can easily trick your logical brain, the source presents a literal, physical test for books. You take a brand new, unread book, roll it up into a cylinder, and point the palm of your hand right at the center of the pages. Then, you use your spiritual sense to feel for a temperature change. A blast of warm air means the book is valuable to you. A cold feeling? That means it's not just worthless, but potentially harmful to your mental state. It is a totally visceral, anti-logical approach.
And you know what? We do this with people too. Have you ever instantly judged a social media profile without knowing why? You get a friend request, look at a single photo, and instantly feel either totally comfortable or totally repelled. You have zero data on this person, yet your gut makes the call. The framework argues this isn't a random bias. It's your spiritual sense working flawlessly, cutting through the noise. That instant first impression, that almost telepathic feeling of being refreshed versus feeling this sudden dim energy, is way more reliable than forcing a rational analysis later. When we ignore a bad gut feeling and try to logically justify why we should like someone, oh, they have a great resume, or we have mutual friends, we enter the trap of rational analysis.
There's this highly poetic, almost haunting quote in the text about what happens when you force logic over intuition. Cut, it won't sever. Sort, it become messier. It is your troubling woe, and an unspeakable taste fills your heart.
It perfectly nails that emotional exhaustion, that deep cognitive dissonance, when we abandon our gut and try to force a bad relationship to work. It's that bitter taste of knowing you should have trusted yourself from day one. Okay, moving on to judging the bigger picture, because this scales up massively.
Spiritual perception isn't just for micro decisions like picking a book. According to the text, it is way more accurate for judging huge, complex structures. Whether you're evaluating a scientific theory, a global religion, a political party, or even the future trajectory of an entire country, engaging your spiritual perception is always your best bet. Relying purely on academic debate or historical data for these things will inevitably lead you astray, but your spiritual sense bypasses all that rhetoric to see their true nature.
Which brings us to the information diet and how you actually protect this intuition.
It's all framed as a clean diet versus messy knowledge. Just like a physical diet, what you feed your mind is absolutely crucial. If you constantly clutter your head with useless data, read bad books, or surround yourself with harmful words, you are actively damaging your ability to sense the non-material world. Consuming all that chaotic, messy knowledge literally makes your spiritual sense blunt, dull, and insensitive. It just gets buried under a mountain of logical static.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I'll leave you with this provocative thought. Look at your own daily habits. Are you consuming too much messy knowledge? Are you endlessly scrolling through distorted historical data or getting caught in endless rational arguments? And if so, is your highly logical mind actually dulling your own deep spiritual intuition? It is a fascinating framework to keep in mind the very next time you get a gut feeling you just can't explain.